Hi guys, it's May and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be continuing my read-along for Scum Villian Self-Saving System Volume 4. I'm so sorry I missed yesterday. I don't know what happened. I just completely spaced on the time. I honestly don't know how or why that happened, but it just suddenly it was 9 p.m. and I hadn't even scheduled the live, so I was just like, this is not gonna work. Hi. Um so anyway, so here we are on a very irregular Friday afternoon, and yeah, hi. Um, I forgot to get myself water, so we're gonna live off the little bit of coffee that I have here with me, and then I shall endeavor to make myself some tea during the half-time break. Also, sorry, for a moment I kind of like forgot what I was doing. So, for anyone who is new here, hi, I'm Janae, and I do live readings of novels that I haven't read before, generally speaking. And at the at the halfway mark, so on the hour, generally I take a 10-minute break in order to just stand up, stretch my legs, and get some new refreshments. And other than that, I hope you guys will enjoy it. So yeah, I'm a little bit late, so I think we'll give like 2 extra minutes just in case there are people who want to arrive who maybe are only now getting their notifications, all those kinds of things. But while we wait, we have not made as much progress with this as I had been hoping, but things kind of just have been a bit less organized than I would have liked. So for us while we wait, where were we? Okay, so we were at the top of page 88, and it was kind of awful, but it's fine. Like I didn't. If you were to ask me what were some scenes that you would have liked to see in the extras, a return to this awful like bully of a person would not have been on my list of preferences, but it's fine. I trust that MXX knows what she's doing. So yeah, I think we can more or less just get into it. Okay. So we left off with you have some talent. If you put some effort into studying, you too might be able to go places. Xie Jianle was 16, 4 years older than Shen Qingqiu, and he bore the weight of all of his parents' expectations. Having been raised in a house of golden bricks, he thought everyone beneath him. The only person he adored, the apple of his eye, was his little sister, Hai Tang. She was the darling of the entire Qie family. Whenever Qie Jianle was in front of Hai Tang, he always played the good older brother. In the past, he'd wished his sister would never marry, and now that Shinju was here, he began to hatch an alternative plan. Ooh, why is this giving me the creeps? But also for some reason at the moment I like read she was the darling of the my brain just auto folded to darling of the heavens. I think I've read too much Urha. Anyway, Chu Tang loved Shinju very much. If Shinju was properly educated, Chu Junlu could turn him into a brother-in-law on the cheap. That didn't seem bad at all. Then his sister would remain by his side, and he could continue using Shinju for his own amusement. As long as the boy remained honest and obedient, there would be no issues. If her tongue married Shenjie, she wouldn't need to leave, and she'd still rely on their family for food, clothes, and money. It would be good as not marrying her off in the first place. The plan had no flaws, other than the fact that matching her with Shenjie was a bit like letting a toad get a taste of some sumptuous, swan meat. Ugh. Okay. Having calculated his plans to perfection, Xu Jianlu would often give Shenju warnings like, if you dare to make Haitang unhappy, I'll make sure to end your sorry life. If not for Haitang, I would have beaten you to death long ago. Humans must understand and repay kindness. Our family gave you the chance to play human, so even if it means repaying us with your life, that's how it should be. Oh, some people are truly just heinous. But also the like play human, as if him just existing and being a human isn't good enough. Um. Anyway, sorry. The older Shenjie grew, the more he understood that this person wouldn't tolerate even the slightest bit of disobedience. His every request was to be obeyed, even if what he heard filled him with indescribable gust. He knew he must not express it. Only in this way could he avoid a vicious beating. But within his heart, he still thought back on the first time he'd met Xie Jianle. The day had been the one and only time he'd driven the young master mad with rage. Yue Qi had insisted on retrieving Shi Wu and the other children. Right away, he'd almost collided with the hooves of a Xie Jianle's horse. In that instant, Shenju forgot Yue Qi's warnings that it would be best not to reveal their rudimentary immortal rudimentary immortal arts to others. He transformed metal into a sharp blade and stabbed it into the horse, straight to the bone. I didn't need to hear that. Oh no. Okay. Xie Jianle and his horse spun around in place on the street, the animal rearing and barking wildly. Chenjo suddenly cursed him to fall off with all his might, to fall and break his neck. But as it happened, Xie Jianle had outstanding horse riding skills. Even with the horse's four legs in midair, he remained firmly in the saddle. Who did that? He roared. Who did it? Of course, Shinji had done it. But even afterwards, when Xie Jianle came knocking, if Shiwu hadn't taken the initiative to say so, no one would have ever known of Shinju's interference. If they hadn't saved Shiwu, he would have been trampled to death beneath the Chia family's hooves. He'd kept his sorry life only to betray Shiwu, only to betray them. Shiwu should have been trampled to death, trampled into mincemeat for thousands to spit upon. Chigo should never have gone back to save him. Even if Shiwu had died, it would have served him right. As Shinju suffered through day after day of torment, he turned those sweet yet fertile thoughts over and over again in his mind, drawing strength and comfort from them, and he waited for a certain someone to keep his promise to rescue him from the sea of suffering. Why do we have to relive the sadness? I don't get it. Okay, that's fine. Part 3. Shenju thought a lot about why Yuichi never returned to look for him. Perhaps he'd been discovered while making his escape, and the human traffickers had broken his legs. Perhaps it had been una- perhaps he had been unable to find any food on his journey, and been unwilling to beg. He'd starved to death. Perhaps his potential had been too meager, so none of the immortal mountains had been willing to take him in. Chandra even imagined walking to the ends of the earth looking for Yu Qi's remains, and how, after finding them, he would dig him a grave with his own two hands. Perhaps he would even do his best to shed a tear. Or, if Yu Qi was fortunate enough to still be alive, Chandra imagined how he himself would cast away everything to rescue Yu Qi from whatever hellish straits he'd fallen into. Even though Shenji himself had only gone from the wolf's den to the tiger's lair, and so was in dire straits himself. But no matter what, He could never have imagined the kind of reunion. He raised and lowered his sword again and again, sending blood splattering everywhere in a horrifying tableau. Flecks of blood splattered into his eyes, but he only blinked a few times and otherwise wore no expression. One could have described his movements as deft and composed. After taking him from sheer manner, the most Wu Yanzi had taught this disciple of his were things like murder and arson, stealth and robbery, and how to profit from chaos. For example, what he was doing now, using the Immortal Alliance conference to loot the bodies of some foolish, immature, and rich children who had thought themselves elite cultivators, divesting them of their storage pouches and then disposing of their corpses. Oh, that's grim, okay? When Yuchi discovered him, he must have been stunned, frozen by Qingqiu's ghastly appearance, for he didn't even register the disciples' bodies on the ground and instead took 2 steps towards him. Qingqiu shivered and abruptly looked up. The moment Yuchi got a clear look at his face, both of them paled into bloodless white. "Stay away," Shenji yelled. Unexpectedly, his first reaction was to throw himself to the ground, snatch an emergency firework from one of the bodies, and release it into the sky. Yuchi was shaken, but still confused. He walked towards Shenji while extending his hand, opening his mouth to say, at which point a disturbing portal emerged from the dense forest beside them. Why am I already nervous? "My dear disciple, who is he? He scared you so terribly. So do you know what it is to be afraid?" Shenji released his grip, and the firework casing fell silently to the ground. He hastily turned round. "Shifu, I'm not afraid of him. I made a mistake just now. I wasn't paying proper attention, which gave this lot on the ground the chance to release a firework. What I'm afraid of is that someone will show up soon." Yuchi had realized that the situation was incredibly dangerous. Without batting an eyelid, he began to gather spiritual energy. Wu Yanzi humphed. "When I saw that firework, I guessed that was the case. You've always been quick and nimble. What happened this time? If they want to go set off fireworks, why didn't you chop off their hands?" Shenju lowered his head. "It's all this disciple's fault. We should go at once. If those old men get here, we won't be able to leave even if we try." But Yuchi moved to block them, raising the sword in his hand. He glanced at Shenju with faintly reddened eyes, his voice hoarse, but unusually resolute. "I can't let you leave." Fierce, Shenju glared at him. Wu Yangzi looked him up and down, then gave his sword the same once over. He scoffed. "From Tangchong Mountain, and even Chongding Peak, the Shensu sword. Ye Qingyan?" At this, Shenju startled, then swiftly returned to his urging. "Shifu, since he's from Tangchong Mountain, we won't be able to kill him swiftly. It will be better for us to escape and fast. Once everyone arrives, we'll be finished." Wu Yanzi sneered. "Tangchong Mountain may possess grand prestige, but I need not stoop so far as to fear a junior cultivator. Besides, he came seeking death himself." As he and Yuchi truly came to blows, Shenji realized that his worry for Yuchi, together with the various clumsy tricks he'd used because of it, were rather laughable. He was terrified of that master of his, Wu Yanzi, terrified to death even. But as Yuchi, or Ye Qingyan, met him in combat, he proved to be more than Wu Yanzi's equal, even without drawing his sword. Nevertheless, Shenji couldn't relax completely. He was all too familiar with Wu Yanzi's fighting style and last resort trump cards. Wu Yanzi had a set of cursed black light talismans. Countless times, Shenji had witnessed Wu Yanzi toss out one of these paper talismans when at a disadvantage and score a kill by catching his opponent off guard. More than one famous cultivator had failed to escape this sinister maneuver. Moreover, it was easy to see that as he was now, Yuchi had little experience fighting enemies. His movements were by the book, and he methodically attacked and parried in turn. Therefore, right when Wu Yanzi was about to throw a talisman, Shenju stabbed a sword through his back. Yuchi grabbed his hand and frantically sprinted away. This makes me so sad because, there's so much between these two, and the fact that it deteriorated and morphed into what we saw at the start of the first volume. It's so tragic because it could have been so different. Okay. Um, Having gone through a fierce battle, both youths were in shock. They leaned against a tree, panting heavily. Once he calmed down, Shinji finally gave Yuichi a long, thorough look. His cultivation was extraordinary, and his bearing poised and steady. His clothes weren't of the common make either, and his demeanor was exactly like that of the great masters themselves. He couldn't have been further from the hellish straits Shinji had imagined. This was not Yuichi, but Liu Qingyan. Liu Qingyan looked excited. His face flushed as he prepared to speak, but Shinji opened fire first. He joined Tangchong Mountain. Shinji couldn't tell what Liu Qingyan was thinking, but the excitement on his face faded a little. Indeed, his complexion paled. You've become Chongding Peak's head disciple? Not bad, said Shinju. Why didn't you come back to look for me? I. Shinju waited for some time, but the next words never came, so he said, Why aren't you saying anything? I'm still waiting. I've always waited. I've already waited so many years after all. Waiting a little longer will be nothing. But how could Ye Qingyan say anything? Shinju crossed his arms. Finally, his waiting was rewarded with Ye Qingyan's quiet words. Sorry, it's Chico who let you down. Ice-cold fury crawled up inside Shinji, engulfing his entire heart. His mouth and nose seemed to fill with the taste of his frenzied, raging blood. First he'd been a rat, forced to swallow its anger, cringing while awaiting more beatings. Then he'd become a gutter rat, scurrying back and forth as everyone chased and hit it. No matter how he changed, he was a rat, cowering with its tail tucked between its legs, unable to see the light, letting years slip by in vain, squandering its time and life. Meanwhile, Ye Qingyan was a true phoenix that had flown to the summit, a carp that had leapt over the dragon's gate. Sorry. All you've ever known to do is say sorry, Shinju sneered, then delivered the final ringing blow. It's utterly useless. Some people were rotten from birth. Shinju thought of himself in exactly this way, someone vile and poisonous from the start, because at that instant he came to a crystal clear realization that he'd rather have met a Yichi who died in some unknown corner, his remains unsightly and forgotten, than a Yichi who was elegant and powerful, his prospects and future boundless. That is incredibly grim. Really realistic. I do think there are people who can't help but feel that way, but it's still grim. Shinji hated part 4. Shinji hated far too many people and far too many things. Obviously, people found it hard to say anything good about the character of someone who hated everything. So, fortunately, by the time he became Shen Qingqiu, he understood he ought to at least keep that hatred from bubbling to the surface. Within Tangchong Mountain, the one he undoubtedly hated most was Liu Qingge. Liu Qingge had achieved success in his youth. His talents were extraordinary, his spiritual energy vast, and his swordplay awe-inspiring. His family and background was excellent, and both his parents were alive. Any one of these things would have been enough to make Shen Qingqiu gnash his teeth and toss and turn for 3 days and 3 nights, let alone all of them together in one person. During Tangchung Mountain's annual martial arts tournament, Shen Qingqiu's opponent had been Liu Qingge. Naturally, the conclusion had been an overwhelming loss on his part. There was no shame in losing to the future Baijiang Peak Lord, or perhaps one should say that this was how it should be, that it was normal. But Shen Qingqiu would absolutely never think such things. What he saw wasn't the bystanders' amazement at how he'd valiantly held out for so long, but Liu Qingge's matter-of-fact arrogance as he held the point of Chen Lian's blade inches from his throat. Qingjing Peak prided itself on being the gentleman's peak, and Shen Qingqiu took to playing a gentleman like a fish to water. Yet Liu Qingge was always able to make his rage boil to the surface, to the point that he didn't bother wasting energy playing nice with his sect sibling. The thing Shen Qingqiu most often said to Liu Qingge was, "Liu Qingge, I'll definitely kill you one day." In this particular instance, the tender young lady carrying the pippa had long since thrown on her thin robes and dashed out in terror. Liu Qingge sent him a glance. "You? Kill me?" It was only 3 words, but Shen Qingqiu heard boundless venom within them. His wrists turned. Ye Qingyan saw that the situation didn't look good and pressed Shen Qingqiu's elbow downward, preventing him from drawing his sword. He looked back and yelled, "Liu Shidi, you should head back." Liu Qingge looked like he couldn't be bothered to deal with this further. With a cold laugh, his figure instantly vanished. This left only the two of them inside the warm red pavilion. One person's clothes were mused and disheveled, while the others had not a thread out of place. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Ye Qingyan yanked Shen Qingqiu off the bed. He was in a rare fit of anger. "Why are you like this?" "How can I do what?" Okay, I feel like there was a mistranslation here where the one said, um, kind of like, "How you like this?" And then the response was probably something similar to, how am I like what?" Or something like that. Because in the context of this, the two sentences together don't make much sense. In my opinion, there's nothing that bad in preferring in theory a scenario in which you will not betray to a scenario in which you are betrayed. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think in theory, the issue is more like the you would rather see him dead than succeeding. Um, but because I think that's very much the kind of person that he becomes later on, where he would rather see anyone dead than doing better than him. Um, but yeah, all of this is just very tragic. Let me try this Instagram. So Yu Qingyan said, "Why you like this?" And then Chen Qingqiu said, "How can I do what?" Two of Tangchong Mountain's head disciples getting into a huge brawl inside a brothel. Does that sound good to you? If you don't tell them, and I don't either, who'd know which sect we're from? Shen Qingqiu countered. Tangchong Mountain is Tangchong Mountain. Tell me, which of Tangchong Mountain's rules decree that that its disciples can't visit this place? Tangchong Mountain isn't a Buddhist monastery or a Taoist temple. They might be able to control everything else, but they can't stop me from looking for women. If Shishong finds it shameful, he should watch that mouth of Liu Qingge's. Indeed, Tangchong Mountain had never expressly ordained such a rule. I don't know where I was going with that. But cultivators were supposed to naturally understand the concept of preserving a pure heart and nature, of exercising self-discipline, especially those of Qingjing Peak, where the peak lords and disciples had invariably remained virtuous and unsullied. Instead, the unwritten consensus had become Shen Qingqiu's justification for sophistry. I mean, he's spotting those loopholes. I don't think anyone can blame him. Rendered speechless, Liu Qingyan spent some time swallowing his words before giving a muted response. I won't say anything. Liu Qidi and the others won't say anything either. No one will know. Then I must thank you both, said Shen Qingqiu as he put on his shoes. Lusting after women damages one's cultivation, said Liu Qingyan. So I'm assuming that our version of Shen Qingqiu is fine then, and lobing her as well because they're lusting after men. So I guess they're in the clear. Is that what I'm hearing? Shen Qingqiu sneered. Didn't you hear your Shibi's tone with those words of his? You kill me with your abilities? Damaged or not, they are as they are. Ye Qingyan was silent for a moment. Yoshidi isn't really such a bad person. He's like that with everyone, not just you. Shen Qingqiu scoffed. Like that with everyone? Don't try to deceive me, Jiangmen Shishong. Is he like that with you? If you extend him a single share of kindness, he'll return it twofold, Ye Qingyan said patiently. Young Min Shishong is truly considerate and understanding. It's just, why doesn't he extend kindness to me first? Why not have pity on me? Show me some compassion. Why must I accommodate him? It's difficult because I'm like, it's a thing of if both people have that attitude, then you're not gonna get anywhere. But at the same time, I kind of like get feeling that way. I'm not saying it's necessarily right to act on feeling that way, but I get feeling that way at least. Um, where was I? Oh, welcome. Sorry, I forgot to say welcome to Lollies and also now welcome to Laura, both at the Cozy Cats tier. That's cool. Um, where am I? Oh goodness. Oh, okay. Okay, wow, you guys are overwhelming me. Thank you guys so much. Um, sorry about that. As Shen Qingqiu had turned a deaf ear to his every plea, Liu Qingyan found it difficult to speak further. After all, he couldn't straight up tell him something like, if he hadn't used every means to ambush Liu Qingge after the meet in order to teach him a lesson, the two of you wouldn't fly into a rage at the slightest contact now, nor would you loathe the mere sight of each other. Shen Qingqiu yanked his clothes over his shoulder with a jerk of his hand, then slid Xiya into its sheath. After taking 2 steps, he thought of something and turned around in query. How did you know to find me here? Who reported it to you? I went to Qingjing Peak but didn't see you, said Liu Qingyan. Then I saw a few Shidi from Baijiang Peak preparing to head there. Preparing to head there for what? Liu Qingyan fell silent. Shen Qingqiu sneered. Perhaps to gang up on me? Is that right? Though conflict often erupted between Shen Qingqiu and Baijiang Peak, the conflict this time was truly overblown. A Baijiang Peak disciple had gone to this small remote town for a task, where he had just happened to see a familiar person enter the largest brothel in the area, the Warm Red Pavilion. From the top to bottom, Baijiang Peak felt the same as Liu Qingge. None of them harbored any goodwill um, toward Shen Qingqiu. Therefore, the disciples had obviously refused to let the chance pass by. He directly followed Shen Qingqiu into the brothel, then mocked him for being a hypocrite and actually entering this sort of place, saying that he'd lost face for their entire sect. Oh my word, thank you Laura as well for upgrading. Yeesh, this feels like a lot. um, After a couple of undiplomatic words, Shen Qingqiu had beaten him severely, leaving him with a serious injury. When this disciple returned to Baijiang Peak, he'd run into Liu Qingge. After questioning him, Liu Qingge had steamed with rage. He had promptly rushed over on his sword for payback, ready to hit Shen Qingqiu back for every blow. If Ye Qingyan hadn't caught Baijiang Peak's junior disciples in their preparations to head to Qingjing Peak and dismantle Shen Qingqiu's bamboo lodgings, there was no telling what wreckage this little town would have suffered. Shame, oh my word. Noting how Ye Qingyan refused to speak, Shen Qingqiu could guess the situation, as if Baijiang Peak ever had any good intentions, so he changed the topic. Why did you go to Qingjing Peak? Well, didn't I tell you not to come looking for me? I just wanted to see how you were doing, said Ye Qingyan. I've troubled Ye Shishong, said Shen Qingqiu. I'm doing very well. I might be a hateful thing to most people, but luckily the Qingjing Peak Lord doesn't despise me. If you truly are doing well, why do you never spend the night on Qingjing Peak? Ye Qingyan asked, following on his heels. I mean, I feel like that's a fair question. Shen Qingqiu gave him a dark look. He knew that Yu Qingyan must be thinking that he was being excluded by the rest of Qingjing Peak. Yu Qingyan's guess wasn't unreasonable, but he was genuinely wrong this time. Though Shen Qingqiu was unpopular among his peers, it wasn't to the extent of being kicked out of the communal sleeping quarters. He just loathed being in close quarters with those of the same sex. Why is there so much irony in that? Oh my word. All those years, whenever one of his beating from Zhejiangle was over, or whenever he had a premonition of another beating, he had crawled to Chiai Tong's room and remained there, quivering. As Zhejiangle was unwilling to let his sister see the side of him that was perverse and lunatic, that had been the only place where Shenjie could hide. Oh goodness, this is too much. And even longer ago, there had been some girl in their group, their big sis. But after she reached a certain age, that big sis had been sold to a withering old man to be his second wife. Afterward, they'd left the city, so they'd never seen him again. Liking women wasn't the least bit shameful, but treating women like like saviors, not souvenirs. Damn, I just made it worse somehow. Um, Cowering within their embrace and seeking courage from them, even without anyone saying it. Chen Qingqiu knew that was horrendously shameful. So even if it meant his death, he would never tell anyone, least of all Ye Qingyan. If I said that I wasn't doing well at Qingjing Peak, what would you do? Chen Qingqiu asked, slow and measured. Would you help me enter Qingjing Peak, just as you recommended me for Qingjing? Sorry, Chongqing Peak, sorry, just as you recommended me for Qingjing. Ye Qingyan gave it some thought, then said solemnly, if that's what you wanted. Clearly, I don't want that, Shen Qingqiu said with a resolute hint. I want to be head disciple. Would you be willing to give me your position? Let me become the sect leader? He asked, forceful and lofty. For better or worse, Qingjing Peak ranks second among the 12 peaks. I'd rather wait to succeed this one. Ye Qingyan sighed. Xiaojie, why must you always act like this? When he heard the name, Shen Qingqiu's entire back shuddered with incomparable irritation. Don't call me that. Among his Qing generation peers, Shen Jie stood out as sharp and resourceful, so the Peak Lord was quite fond of him. He hadn't been around for long, nor was his foundation up to par with his peers, yet had been designated the successor. Once the Peak Lord gave their head disciple new names, the original ones would be discarded. In the past, Xie Jianle had forced Shenjie to learn how to read and write. Shenjie had been unwilling to learn, had detested it to the point of madness, yet now it was only through his ability in reading and studying, through being smarter than his peers, that he'd be able to being able to earn the changing Peak Lord's favor. To make it even more laughable, of the thousands of possible names in this world, the Peak Lord had just happened to name him Qingqiu. Yeah, I like that is some cruel irony. But no matter how laughable, no matter how it made him gnash his teeth, Shen Qingqiu still wanted that name, for this name represented that from now onward a shining new life was his. Shen Qingqiu gathered his thoughts and smiled happily. The name irritates me whenever I hear it. I've long forgotten it. So please, Jiangren Xishong, you should also discard it. Yu Qingyan said, then the day you respond to it would be the day it no longer irritates you. A pause. Chenju sneered. That will never happen. Yu Qingyan, allow me to say it once more. Never let me hear that name ever again. Oh, okay. We're on part 5 now. This is getting a bit rough. Part 5. Shen Qingqiu finally couldn't take it any longer. He headed to Chongding Peak. When it came to Chongding Peak, Shen Qingqiu always tried to visit as little as possible. When it came to Yu Qingyan, he always tried to see him as little as possible too. Therefore, the 12 Peaks' annual martial arts tournament was terribly troublesome for him. Chongding Mountain's 12 peaks, had a fixed ranking. This ranking was unrelated to the strength of each peak. Instead, it had been designated back when why am I struggling so much right now? Tong Mountain's first generation of peak lords had established themselves. All successive peak lords had addressed each other in accordance with the ranking rather than by their order of entry into the sect. Therefore, even though he'd entered the sect quite some time after Liu Qingge, because Qingjing Peak was ranked second, only below Chongbing Peak, while Baijiang Peak was ranked 7th, Liu Qingge still had to address Shen Qingqiu as Xishong. He probably enjoyed that way too much, I'm a word. If through gritted teeth. At the same time, because of this ranking, Chongding Peak and Qingjing Peak's disciples were customarily positioned such that their squadrons neighbored each other. On top of that, their head disciples had stand side by side. Yu Qingyan was unable to catch Shen Qingqiu at other times, so he could latch on to these opportunities to ask him all sorts of questions. He chattered non-stop as he inquired after important things like how his cultivation and studies were going, as well as trivial matters like whether he had ample food and clothes, or whether he was cold or warm. Though Shen Qingqiu found this unbearably annoying, he wasn't stupid enough to embarrass the sect leader's head disciple before such a large audience. For every 20 questions Yu Qingyan asked, he replied once, maintaining his distance and courtesy both, while ruminating over the techniques from his studies the night prior and contemplating other things. This was the martial arts tournament's most comical scene ever every year. I'm struggling right now. I'm kind of debating taking an early break just so I can gather myself, but I don't think I should do that. Words are hard, apparently. Perhaps the two of them didn't realize it, but for many disciples, watching these two head disciples was the only fun they had during the Peak Lords' tedious pre-meeting speeches. I love that. They'd watched one party act unlike himself, ignoring the silence as he murmured and whispered, while the other party absent-mindedly stared straight ahead, humming and hawing. Therefore, Shen Qingqiu's decision to voluntarily come to Chongding Peak not only surprised and pleased Ye Qingyan, but practically all the disciples at the scene were jumping over themselves, banging gongs and drums. They yelled for everyone to come watch. Oh my word, why is this so weirdly ridiculous but also relatable? Shen Qingqiu didn't have much to say. He had no interest in playing the part of the circus monkey for others. He applied for permission to cultivate in the Lingqi caves, then left immediately afterwards. Isolated from the outside world, the Lingqi caves overflowed with abundant spiritual energy. As Shen Qingqiu moved through the caverns, his expression grew increasingly grim. Those days he'd squandered under Qie Zhenluo and Wu Yanzi had been of no small consequence. Within the new generation of Peak Lords, Ye Qingyan had naturally attained core formation first. Qi Qingqi and Liu Qingge had followed practically on his heels, breaking through at the same time. Unending Peak's Xiang Qinghua, with his mediocre background, had barely managed to keep up, but even he had achieved official ascension. However, the more anxious Shen Qingqiu grew, the more stuck he became, until he was suspended in place and unable to progress. He was racked with stress and anxiety. It was like he was swallowing 100 kilos of tobacco every day. It smoldered within his head and stomach, stroking his flames of rage and irritation until they erupted. With Shen Qingqiu like this, no one dared to get on his bad side, but even if they didn't dare, Shen Qingqiu didn't let them go. Luo Binghe was using the incorrect cultivation manual that Shen Qingqiu had handed him. He should have long since died of bleeding from the 7 apertures, his body rupturing down to his bones, skin, meridians, tendons, and flesh. But not only had this failed to come to pass, Luo Binghe's cultivation was steadily improving. Yeah, the magic of the protagonist. But also, it's super grim to think he was willing to do this to an innocent child who had done nothing to him except exist and have a more promising future than him. You know, that he was willing to murder a child because of jealousy. I know we knew this, but I feel like having it put into these kinds of terms makes it so much clearer how bad it actually is. Okay. Furthermore, Shen Qingqiu had told Mimi Ming thousands of times to stay far away from Luo Binghe, and that she wasn't allowed to get involved with him. So why did he see them every day, whispering together before his eyes? Shen Qingqiu was filled with paranoia. He forever felt like everyone was secretly talking behind his back, discussing how he'd been unable to attain core formation even after this long. That it was unbecoming for one in his position. They hoped to secretly finish him off and replace him. So now he secluded himself within the Lingqi caves. If he still couldn't make a breakthrough, Shen Qingqiu sat upon the stone formation. But his thoughts continued to spiral everywhere until he'd worked himself into a cold sweat. His breaths and circulation choked, stars flashing in his vision. Suddenly he felt a burst of spiritual energy raging rampantly through his meridians. This was no small matter. Panicking, he quickly went still, sitting tight as he attempted to rein in his mind, when a person suddenly approached him from behind. Shen Qingqiu's hair stood on end, and he snatched up Shuya. drawing it halfway as he yelled, "Who's there?" A palm gently pressed against his shoulder. "It's me," said Ye Qingyan. Shen Qingqiu said nothing. Ye Qingyan continued to send him spiritual energy, pacifying his wild spiritual fluctuations in their violent stampede. "My apologies. Your mind and spirit are currently disturbed. I frightened you." Shen Qingqiu had been frightened by his own spiraling thoughts. For this reason, he was even less amiable to listening to others pointed out. "Who's frightened?" he snapped angrily. "Jiangmen Shishong never enters the leeching caves for secluded cultivation, no? So why must you fight me for a spot the moment I do?" "It's not true that I've never entered them," said Ye Qingyan. "I've come here before." Shen Qingqiu was baffled by this tangent. Who cares whether your esteemed self has come here? I mean, you kind of did ask indirectly. Oh goodness, this is beautiful. Let me just quickly read this and then I'll show you guys. Ye Qingyan sighed. "Shidi, can you not just stay quiet for a while and concentrate on regulating your breathing?" Upon a stone candlestick's dried wax, a faint flame flickered to life. Shen Qingqiu hadn't planned to retort, but when he took in the full sight of the cave he'd chosen, he was stunned. "Did someone duel to the death in here?" he blurted out. Countless slashes from either blade or axe gouged the cavern walls, leaving the impression of a disfigured face covering the layer upon layer of scars, covered with layer upon layer of scars. The effect was both sinister and terrifying. Behind him, Ye Qingyan said, "No, duels are forbidden in the Lingqiu caves." Other than the sword gashes, there were also swaths upon swaths of dark red bloodstains. Some looked like blood spray, as though splattered there after someone had been pierced through by a sharp blade. Others appeared to be from someone slamming their forehead into the wall, as if they were begging for something, leaving behind smear after smear with each impact. That is gross. Shen Qingqiu stared at those almost blackened stains. Then, did someone die here? Whenever they interacted, it was usually Ye Qingyan who talked tirelessly. Never had there been a situation like this, where Ye Qingyan refused to utter a single word. Shen Qingqiu found this alien and strange to the point that goosebumps broke over his body. "Ye Qingyan, I'm here. If you're here, why won't you say something? Isn't it because the moment I do, you'll find it annoying?" Shen Qingqiu snorted a laugh. "That's right. You're very annoying. So you know it too." But he didn't want to fall into a silence within the darkness either, so he could only reluctantly continue on this thread. Okay, before we move on, let me just quickly show you this because even though it's grim, it's also weirdly beautiful. Look at this beautiful art! I honestly think it's stunning. I hope you guys can see it properly. I heard that sometimes they'll shut disciples and other sect members inside the Lingqiu caves, like those who are experiencing a chi deviation or those who have resorted to unnatural paths. Do you think this might have been one of those situations? After a long time, Ye Qingyan made a non-committal noise. "Oh." Shen Qingqiu had received the cold shoulder, but he still squinted at the stretch of wall. "It seems that whoever this was wanted very much to leave," he continued. "They struggled for a long time before dying. If all this blood had come from the same person, even if they had survived, they would have had one foot in the grave." Shen Qingqiu suddenly felt that something was off about the hand Ye Qingyan had on his back. Alarmed, he said, "What's wrong?" It was a long moment before Ye Qingyan replied, "Nothing." Shen Qingqiu shut up. He couldn't see Ye Qingyan's expression, where he stood behind him, but he could feel the hand passing him spiritual energy, and how it trembled slightly. Like, I'm glad we're already had as happy of a resolution as we can get within the circumstances with regards to Ye, because otherwise this would have made me even more upset than it's already making me. Because at least we know he kind of does get his own happy ending in a way. Okay, we're on part 6 right now, so I think I'm gonna take my 10-minute break now, because let me just make sure. Yeah, it's still a few pages until we get to part 7. So I think this might be a better place to stop, and then we'll be back at 2 past to continue the rest of tonight's reading, if that's okay. Because we are now on page 108. I'm just going to quickly check something here. Okay, I will see you guys in 10 minutes. Okay, I am back. Not that bad. In case you guys still want to follow along, we are on page 108. Sorry, here we go. Part 6. When Shen Qingqiu stirred, he felt a coolness trickling from the wounds on his body. The burning, hellish pain had been alleviated by quite a bit. He struggled to open his eyes. One knee On one knee beside him was a figure, currently looking down at him, examining Shen Qingqiu's condition. Upon the white stone platform, a black hen was evenly laid, a plain and rustic longsword held firmly beneath it. Several empty, upended medicine bottles lay scattered about. The two swords was a Shinsu. Where did I pull two from? Sorry, the sword was Shinsu. The person was, as one would expect, Ye Qingyan. It was the same gentle and handsome face, just a good deal paler than usual, the exhaustion evident. At the sort of time only Ye Qingyan would still come to see him. How did you get in? Shen Qingqiu asked, his voice hoarse. Loving her was determined to make him suffer. There was no way he'd have been willing to let Ye Qingyan enter the water prison to help him keep holding on by a thread. Seeing that Shen Qingqiu could speak, Ye Qingyan sighed in relief. He held his hand while whispering, "Stop talking. Focus." He wanted to pass Shen Qingqiu's spiritual energy and help those wounds heal faster. This time, at last, Shen Qingqiu didn't brush him aside, because right now he was thinking, that's right, no matter what, he's still a sect leader. As harsh as Liu her and that old geezer from Huanhua Palace wanted to be, they had to at least show some superficial courtesy. But it must have taken a lot of trouble for Ye Qingyan to gain entrance. I'm trying to piece together where in the narrative this event is falling, because it seems like this is Shen Qingqiu's or like Shen Jie's experience within the original version of the novel. Up until this point, I had thought it was his experience up until he was replaced by by our Shen Qingqiu. But now it seems like this is him in the original novel. I'm so confused. Spiritual energy coursed through Shen Qingqiu's wounds, and the pain in his twisted flesh felt like a dense cluster of iron needles stabbing into him. Shen Qingqiu clenched his teeth, his hatred surging to the point that he laughed instead. That little bastard Loving her sure has a plenty of tricks up his sleeves. At the sound of the bone-deep venom within his tone, Ye Qingyan sighed again. In truth, Ye Qingyan wasn't the type to sigh much, but Shen Qingqiu was inevitably capable of wearing him to the bone. "Sidi," he said, exhausted, "we've already come this far, so why do you still refuse to consider your wrongdoings? Even if someone had knocked out his teeth, even if he was left swallowing his own blood, Shen Qingqiu had always stubbornly refused to admit his transgressions, especially in front of Ye Qingyan, in front of whom you could absolutely forget about any confessions. What wrongdoings? Shen Qingqiu asked bitterly. Zhangmen Shishong, please tell me, what is loving her, if not a bastard? You still wait. Sorry, you just wait. You won't be satisfied only taking it out on me. If, in the future, some tumultuous storm upsets the cultivation world, then the only thing I will have done wrong was fail to cut him down at the start." Liu Qingyan shook his head. It seemed like he'd anticipated this answer, and that he had no desire to advise or admonish him. The situation had already gone past the point of no return. Any further admonishment was pointless. Suddenly, he asked, "Did you really kill Liu Shidi?" Okay, so we're past that point in the original novel. That is pretty damn intense. I don't know if I like this. Like, I was willing to tolerate it because it was like, oh, it's very tragic that all this happened. But I don't know how I'm gonna feel now that we're seeing the bit that luckily was cut out because of the new Shen Qingqiu's arrival. Shen Qingqiu didn't want to look at his face at all while he answered, but he couldn't help but lift his eyes, giving Liu Qingyan's expression a quick glance. He froze for a moment, then abruptly yanked his hand out of Liu Qingyan's grip and sat up. "You repeatedly said that you'd kill him one day," said Liu Qingyan, "but I never thought that you would actually do it. Aren't you thinking it now?" Shen Qingqiu asked coldly. "He's already been killed. Does Zhang Wenqishong not think it too late to rebuke this humble Shen at this point? Or do you wish to cleanse the sect?" "I have no right to rebuke you," said Liu Qingyan. Both his eyes and his expression was exceedingly serene, so much so that Shen Qingqiu inexplicably became furious with shame. "Then what are you trying to do? Has Shidi ever considered that, if you hadn't treated robbing her like that in the beginning, everything that unfolded today never would have happened?" Shen Qingqiu burst into laughter. "Why does Zhang Wenqishong say such ludicrous things? What's happened has happened. I've always considered it hundreds and thousands, already considered it hundreds of thousands of times. There's no if, no in the beginning. There was never any chance of redemption." It's weirdly satisfying to have Shen Qingqiu proving wrong, even if it's at the same time also tragic. Liu Qingyan slowly raised his face. Shen Qingqiu knew that saying those words was as good as taking a knife and stabbing it into Liu Qingyan's chest. At first he was gleeful, but then he looked at Liu Qingyan, woodenly kneeling as he stared blankly at Shen Qingqiu. All of Liu Qingyan's composure, poise, and demeanor had disappeared, as if he'd aged many years in an instant. And when Shen Qingqiu saw this, a strange sensation suddenly welled inside his heart. It was probably pity. The stalwart mountain that never changed, the eternal calm and collected Secluded year of Tangchong Mountain, was at this moment so wretched, so browbeaten, that Shen Qingqiu couldn't help but feel pity. And with this pity, something inside Shen Qingqiu's chest, a knot that had resided within him for many years, finally came undone. With that, he came to the cheerful conclusion that Liu Xunyan had truly done everything he could. He'd gone above and beyond to fulfill the calls of both kindness and duty. Regardless of how much guilt weighed down his heart, his debt had long since been repaid in full. "You should go," said Shen Qingqiu. "I'll tell you this. Even if all of this could be undone from the beginning, in the end, the conclusion would remain the same. My heart is full of malice, my insides hatred and resentment. Today, Lord Bingham wishes for me to die horribly, and I only have myself to blame." Wow, in terms of how I'm feeling, that took a freaking 180-degree turn. Okay. "Do you still hold such hatred within yourself?" asked Liu Qingyan. Shen Qingqiu laughed uproariously. "Only when I see other people unhappy can I be happy myself. What do you think?" Holding Shinsu across both hands, Liu Qingyan offered it to Shen Qingqiu. "If you still hold such hatred, draw Shinsu and take my life." Shen Qingqiu scoffed. "You asked me to kill you here," said Liu. "Are you unsatisfied with the crimes Lord Binghe has already charged me with? You think them too few. Besides, who do you think you are? My hatred will be resolved as long as I kill you. I'm far beyond cure. I hate everything. Don't blame this number one Shen for any disrespect or mockery. But if Secluded considers himself that very cure, he thinks too highly of himself. He was devastatingly straightforward with his humiliation of Ye Qingyan, but the latter didn't withdraw his hands. It was like he hadn't understood. Instead, he seemed to summon his courage. Shajie, don't call me that, Shen Qingqiu snarled. Slowly, Ye Qingyan's hands slumped, the sword luring with them. A long moment passed, and then he went to hold Shen Qingqiu's hand again. He sent him an unceasing flow of spiritual energy, helping to alleviate those injuries. It was like his courage had been shattered. For all through the following moments, Yuchinya never again opened his mouth to speak. Finally, Shen Qingqiu said, I thank Xiang for his generosity. Now get lost. Never appear before me ever again. Ye Qingyan put Shen Su back on his waist, then complied with Shen Qingqiu's wish, and slowly walked out. If you can escape this, set leader here. Get far away as you can. From now on, never again involve yourself with a thing like Shen Qingqiu. I have like a slight headache here from trying not to cry. Okay, part 7. Okay, hold on. Before we start here, I just need like because his death still freaks me out. Like I can't help it. It's so incredibly grim. Every single time I read it, I feel affected again. Okay. With his remaining eye, Shen Qingqiu stared at the cellar entrance. After staring at for okay, let's try this one more time. With his remaining eye, Shen Qingqiu stared at the cellar entrance. After staring at it for an unknown number of days, loathing her finally returned. Even when inside a damp, gloomy underground prison, loathing her was graceful and elegant as ever, unswilled and pristine. As he stepped over the hardened black bloodstains on the ground, he spoke charmingly. Secluded kept the appointment as expected. I am truly grateful to the tactful yet sorrowful letter of blood Shizun wrote. Otherwise, this disciple could never have succeeded so easily. Originally, this disciple wanted to bring Secluded's body back to show Shizun, but the arrows had been drenched in a rare poison. When he got close and touched them, even slightly, Secluded just, alas, I could only retrieve his sword. Let's call it a memento for Shizun. This is unnecessarily painful. Do they have to do this to me? Nobinger was lying. Nobinger was a shameless, treacherous little liar who spoke only falsehoods. His flagrant lies were unaccountable. So this time, too, he had to be conniving away with some plot or scheme with which to deceive others. Nobinger sat down on the chair off to the side. Whenever he watched Shinjuku scream and wail, he always used this seat. He scraped at the leaves drifting within his steaming cup of tea and commented, Heroes and famed swords come in pairs. Shunsu is indeed an excellent blade, worthy of Secluded. However, there's something even more wondrous about the sword. Secluded's cultivation has truly opened my eyes. While Shizun is enjoying his remaining days here, if you're bored with nothing to do, you can thoroughly ponder it. It's truly very interesting. Chen Qingqiu didn't understand. You know what I'm scared of? And maybe I'm like wrong here, or I misunderstood what we originally learned about the sword. But could you imagine how infinitely more cruel it would be? And kind of in the same way that the Yi City arc in Modal Zusha was particularly cruel, in my opinion, if Robin He didn't actually kill Ye Qingyan, he just captured him. And then he's gonna like lure Shen Qingqiu into using the sword to to defend himself or something like that. And in the use of the sword, obviously that would kill Ye Qingyan. And so Ye Qingyan would have technically died by Shen Qingqiu's hand. But if he was willing to disclose, well, not disclose, but help lobbying her by luring Ye Qingyan with a letter, I feel like he's past the point where that kind of manipulation would have any effect on him potentially. Anyway, in Fanhua Palace's water prism, upon their last meeting with each other, he'd done his utmost to be callous, cruel, and sarcastic. He told Liu Qingyan to get lost, and Liu Qingyan had done so. Shen Qingqiu had been uncertain of that letter of blood, if that letter of blood would call him here, but no normal person, if they were of sound thought, would step into such a blatant, undisguised trap. He still didn't understand. I thought you weren't coming. Roving had found his results yet unsatisfactory. He smiled brightly. Ah, right. Though Shizun's letter of blood was awfully heart-wrenching, it was a bit sloppy and half-hearted. After all, it had been perfunctorily written for this disciple while under great duress. This disciple understands. Therefore, in order to express your sincerity, I had two other things specially sent with it. Do we want to know? Is it his eye? Shen Qingqiu understood. Those other things were the two legs that had once been attached to. Oh, great! So he's already being carved into his stomach at this point. Oh, like it's. What was it? Not a stump, a stick. Is that the way they described it? Oh, so, did he already lose his arms as well? It's so cool to think someone could do something like that. Like this flavor of roping her is really not the kind of protagonist I would ever want to read. Um, this was far too comical. Once he'd waited days and nights for that person, and he hadn't come. And now, when he never thought that person would, he just had to. On the corner of Shen Qingqiu's lips curled a cold smile. Huh, Ye Qingyan. Ye Qingyan. Originally, Lobingher's mood could have been considered cheerful, but when he saw that bizarre smile, he inexplicably became upset. What are you smiling about? He asked gently. Oh, that was not gently said, but okay, sorry about that. Shen Qingqiu ignored him, but continued to sneer. Lobingher shared his gleeful expression. Shen Qingqiu, he said attentively, do you think that pretending to be insane will work on me? Lobingher, said Shen Qingqiu, enunciating every syllable. You're a bastard. You know that. A sudden silence descended around them. Lobingher stared at him, and Shen Qingqiu stared unswervingly back. Suddenly, Lobingher's lips twitched. His right hand gently caressed Shen Qingqiu's left shoulder, then squeezed. I don't need to hear slash see slash read this again. A terrifying scream pierced the air. Blood sprayed from the fresh stump that had been Shen Qingqiu's left arm, and he howled while roaring with laughter, his breath broken and stilted. Lobbing her. Huh, lobbing her, you. For lobbing her, torturing Shen Qingqiu was an incredibly satisfying pastime. Shen Qingqiu's screams made him feel like he was floating in paradise. But this time, for some reason, lobbing her didn't feel the same joy. His chest heaved, its rise and fall growing increasingly violent. With a kick, he knocked Shen Qingqiu over, making him spin in place on the ground, smearing blood all over the floor. Previously, Lobinger had ripped off his two legs in the same manner, as if plucking limbs from an insect. Pain tore through Shen Qingqiu, the kind that made him feel like he was in hell, yet the sensation no longer seemed real. On the contrary, he became lucid, clear, and rational, loathing her. Everything you have today you owe to taking me as your master, so shouldn't you thank me? Instead, you're really unable to tell what's good for yourself. As expected, you're an ungrateful bastard. Huh. Robinhood's rage passed in an instant and he suddenly calmed down. His smile was sinister as he said softly, "Do you want to die? How can something like death come so cheaply? Shuzhen, you've committed many evils in your life. You hurt those with whom you had grievances, and also those against whom you bore no grudges. Even when half in your grave you managed to drag down a sect leader. If your death isn't drawn out, if you don't simultaneously endure else's suffering at least once, how can you do right by them?" With a wave of his hand, he cast Xiansu's fragments onto the ground. When Shen Qingqiu heard the resolute clatter, it was as if his throat had been slashed with an invisible knife. His laughter instantly stopped. Amidst the disheveled hair and a face drenched in blood, a single eye shone brightly, a white fire glowing in the dark night. He shakily drew himself towards those broken sword fragments. There was nothing left, only a single blade. He had single-handedly created the loathing of today, but who had single-handedly wrought the ending of Shen Qingqiu? Ye Qingyan shouldn't have met this kind of fate. For the purposes of attending a decades-late appointment, in order to fulfill a futile, meritless promise, sword broken, the man dead. It shouldn't have been like this. Threads of blood unfurled, extending outward, right before they should have converged into one. They passed each other by. Well, that was a cheerful frickin' extra. Sorry, I just needed a moment there. Okay. Hope the next extra isn't as grim because honestly, like, even though the the first extra kind of had a bit of a happy-ish resolution to it, and especially in comparison to this one, it still was pretty damn grim. So this is not looking good for the Scum Villain extras track record so far. Okay, let's go. 25. Bamboo Branch Poem. Zhuzhi-lang had known for a long, long time that it was a disgusting monster. I don't, yeesh, I don't want to be visiting characters that are already past and I just get to feel sad about it or like distressed. Even on the southern border, where monsters flourished, it was considered a monster among monsters. Back then, it hadn't been called Zhuzhi-lang, for it had possessed no name. Generally speaking, upon sighting a half-man, half-snake thing slithering around on the ground, no one would be bored enough to think of giving it a name. Even if they were bored enough, the southern border demons preferred to give it a couple of kicks, stab its tail, or study this weird little thing for a weak spot to see if you could even beat it to death. Its daily schedule was very simple: slither, look for water; slither, look for food. slither, bite, and scrimmage with the other beast-shaped demons. Though it lacked an impressive appearance, when it came to fighting it wasn't at too much of a disadvantage. On the contrary, not only was its body flexible and agile, its disgusting appearance often disturbed and distracted its opponents during battle. Therefore, this weird little thing, being both ugly and a pain, was extremely unpopular in the southern border. Upon seeing it for the first time, even an educated noble like Tianlanjin stared it up and down for a while before he said with all sincerity, "It's so ugly." As was to be expected, the black-armored generals standing apathetically behind him said nothing. "Far too ugly," Tianlanjin repeated. It was uncertain who he was complaining to. There was too much emphasis in that sentence. The weird little thing shrank away. Then again, it felt, somehow, that this esteemed noble's criticism held no true disgust. It had seen gazes rife with disgust many, many times, and they hadn't been like this. Tianlanjin gracefully shifted into a half-crouch, staring at it. "Do you remember your mother?" It shook its head. "Oh," said Tianlanjin. "That's good too. If I had that kind of mother, I too would prefer not to remember her." Why is that weirdly funny? It didn't know what to say. Of course, even if it had known, it wouldn't have been able to say it. All it could do was release a raspy hiss. Tianlanjin gave it a smile. "However, there are some things you should be told. Your mother is dead. I'm her older brother. To fulfill her dying wish, I've come to see you." Demons were cold-blooded. When it came to the death of a blood relative, any one of them could speak of the event cavalierly, glossing over it with a single line. The weird little thing didn't feel anything in particular. It only stiffly nodded out of habit. Tianlanjin seemed to find this dull. "All right," he said dryly. "I've seen to her last request. All these are your subordinates. From here on out, this plot of land will be yours." Yes, you who seem to not have much prospect of anything, take this land and do amazing things with it, because that's how that works. Um, The subordinates he referred to were those hundreds of black armored generals. Although these things had no minds and couldn't think, they feared neither pain nor death, and would never stop nor feel fatigue. They formed an invincible, all-conquering army, and Tianlanjin had indeed handed them off to a half-human, half-snake monster on a whim. Tianlanjin stood up and patted the non-existent dust from his head, then turned and left. An unexpected development. The weird little thing wavered in place before wriggling its way after him. Tianlanjin looked back, bewildered. "What are you following me for?" The snake man dared not move. At the sight of this, Tianlanjin took another step forward, and it once again began to slither behind him, squirming. Tianlanjin stopped in place and asked in confusion, "Can you not understand me?" This scene repeated once, twice, then three times. In the end, Tianlanjin simply ignored the thing, going on his way with his hands clasped behind his back. The snake man clumsily tagged along after him. Tianlanjin was a special existence. His blood was noble, and his status extraordinary, so naturally he had no shortage of enemies. As the snake man followed, countless rabble came to make trouble for him. Despite Tianlanjin clearly having no need for outside help, the snake man always stepped up to fight with all its might, offering its meager martial ability. This happened numerous times until Tianlanjin finally couldn't ignore the thing's existence. He sent the battered and bruised snake man 2 glances and delivered his assessment. Still so ugly. Wounded, the snake man sank back. Tianlanjin smiled again. "And also stubborn. That's not very personal." Even after following him all this time, Snake Man had never once flinched back from many difficulties and obstacles, but when met with this unkind evaluation, it was filled with the impulse to turn and run, no, slither away. It never would have guessed that in the next moment Tianlanjun would place a bare hand on its head and sigh, both ugly and stubborn, I can't stand to watch this any longer. A strange and gentle flow between warm and cold coursed through all its limbs and bones. But how could it have limbs? The snake man realized very quickly that, without its knowledge, four perfectly whole limbs had sprouted from its once deformed torso. On top of that, 10 fingers, things he had found exquisite yet unattainable, had appeared upon his neck in new palms. It was the body of a youth. The body's age was around 15 to 16, its complexion fair and figure slender, healthy, and whole. Tianlanjin moved his hand away, his pitch black irises reflecting a white silhouette. While holding the youth's chin, he said, I think this looks a bit better. Any thoughts? The other opened his mouth, wanting to speak. He had finally managed to obtain a man's form, but no matter how he tried, his mouth and tongue failed to obey his commands. The moment he opened his mouth, and a slightly sluggish sound escaped, the warm liquid slipped out of his eyes. I'm assuming that's tears, because otherwise it's probably blood, and that's alarming. Though Zhuzhi-lang firmly believed that his lord could do no wrong, he secretly thought that his lord's brain actually wasn't too sharp. That's hilarious. Even after receiving tacit permission to stay at Tianlanjin's side for a long period of time, Zhuzhi-lang had no name. Tianlanjin didn't often command the people around him, so he didn't need to call the youth by name. Hence, they passed many months in a muddle. Then one day Tianlanjin wanted to find a certain poetry collection from the human realm. He overturned boxes and cabinets, but couldn't find it, and it wasn't until he was forced to call someone for help that he suddenly remembered he had a nephew whose presence was about equivalent to that of a patch of empty air, and who was currently sitting in the corner of his study. Oh my word, what a description! Poor thing. But after calling out, hey, he couldn't think of what to say next. Tianlanjin frowned and thought for a while, then said, have I never asked for your name? My lord, the subordinate has no name, his nephew honestly replied. How can you have no name? Tianlanjin asked, bewildered. That's so strange. Then what am I supposed to call you? Whatever my lord wishes to call me will do. After saying this, the youth walked to the bookcase and pulled out a poetry collection from where Tianlanjin had randomly stuffed it after finishing his read. Then he presented it to his lord with both hands. Tianlanjin was most satisfied. As he took the collection, he said, not having a name isn't much of a problem. We can simply give you one. After flipping through a couple of pages at random, please tell me he didn't just randomly pick a name for him. Though I suppose that's how all names are picked, but still. With his head lowered, he chose a phrase on a whim. Let's call you Zhuzhi-lang. With his sharp eyes, he'd given the text a skim or two. By tender green willows over placid river waters, I listened to my love song. Lovers sing his song on the shore. The sun rises from the east as rain dims the west. Here, clear skies and the dark mingle in concord. Bamboo branch song jujutsu. Ah, okay. Because I was wondering where the title of the chapter came in, or extra came in. His nephew shook his head. You don't like it? Asked Tianlanjin. He handed him the book. Too picky, then choose one yourself. His nephew didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My lord, only nobles can use such a title. So particular even at your tender age, said Tianlanjin. Fine, then we'll call you Zhuzhi-lang. Even everything Tian Langjun did was done flagrantly. He'd flagrantly given his nephew a life, and he flagrantly gave him a name. And at that moment, at this place, due to him, Zhuzhi-lang was flagrantly born. That is weirdly wholesome. But no matter how careless, how childish his behavior, he was still Tian Lanjun, the person for whom Zhuzhi-lang would brave both fire and flood, for whom he would sacrifice 10,000 lives. One could scarcely imagine that Tian Lanjun was also pondering whether his nephew had spent too many years as a snake and had therefore become a little foolish. Said nephew refused to call him uncle and insisted on calling him my lord. He refused to go by a carefree lordling on the southern border and instead insisted on following. Sorry, he refused to go be a carefree lordling on the southern border and instead insisted on following Tianlanjin to be an errand boy. He even refused a good quality name, instead insisting on demoting himself. He truly was a bit foolish, but a brain that wasn't sharp was a lifelong problem, so it couldn't be helped. Let him do as he wishes. They are both, like, so weird, but it works. I'm glad it works for them. It's fine. Tianlanjun truly loved any and everything to do with humans. He probably felt that demons were a cold and boring lot. Yet, when it came to humans, he nursed a strange passion for and a beautiful mental image of that foreign race, almost to an exaggerated extent. Any time he went anywhere, his most common destination was the borderlands. He'd pass the boundary markers, and on his short stays, he'd drink some wine while listening to stories. But on his long stays, it wasn't out of the question for him to spend a whole year, or even more, touring the human realm. Tenanjin probably wasn't the type to enjoy being followed. He often dismissed his black armored generals in the hundreds or thousands. But as far as Zhejiang was concerned, first off, he didn't talk too much, and second, he didn't get in the way. He only silently followed after Tianmanjin, so it wouldn't have been very different if he hadn't existed at all. Sometimes he helped out by paying the bill or running an errand, and he was both convenient and considerate, so he didn't particularly annoy his uncle. What a weird dynamic. Even when he was meeting with that maiden Sue, neither of them minded Zhuzhi-lang tagging along. As if of one mind, they both pretended Zhuzhi-lang was a real snake who could understand neither normal conversations nor more intimate exchanges. They focused on each other and acted like he wasn't there. That's kind of sad, though. Only once did Tianlanjun try to drive Zhejiang away, even telling him to get lost. As someone who'd always pursued grace and refinement, it had been some of the crudest language he'd ever used. Bailu Mountain. As for what Tianlanjun and Su Shiyan's first meeting was was like, Zhejiang didn't witness it himself. At the time he had, at Tianlanjun's request, been standing in line for a famous author's newest work. I kind of love that. Like, it's so very human. It's obviously he's not, but it's such a human thing. Initially, he felt no curiosity about their meeting, but after it happened, Tiananjin fell into an odd state for a long time. While Zhijiang was acting as a snake-shaped transportation device, Tiananjin said from his seat on his head, "In the plays I've read, maidens from the human realm are ununanimously gentle as water, considerate and charming. Hence I thought that all maidens would be like this. So I've been lied to. Zhijiang, one can't read too many plays." That's again weirdly wholesome. Why is this man so wholesome? Then another time his lord, who'd conclusively forgotten about not reading too many plays, was enjoying another one with relish as he said, "Do I look like someone who can't carry things? Or someone who's so poor that they can't even afford the trip home?" Then, when Zhuzhi-lang was doing his laundry, Tianlanjin crouched gracefully beside him while saying, "Zhuzhi-lang, what do you think of my face? Is it not handsome? Typically speaking, shouldn't anyone who beholds my face immediately transform into a young woman tenderly budding into love?" Oh no! Zhuzhi-lang shook out the clothes he'd wrung and hung them on a bamboo pole, respectfully agreeing. At the same time, he was thinking of how he'd read quite a few of his lord's nonsensical plays together with him. He didn't know what other people were like, but the way his lord was acting now was really rather akin to a love-struck teenage girl in these books. Therefore, he inevitably became curious. Very perceptive of him, I have to say. In Zhuzhilang's imagination, a maiden who entered an abandoned town filled with troublemaking demons all by herself, who while dispatching evil spirits had told Tianlanjin to sing and play his music farther away so it wouldn't get in the way, and who after dispatching them had handed Tianlanjin 3 silvers, saying that it was money for his trip home. Well, even if she wasn't burly and heavy-set, she should at least look like a martial arts master with fierce and ferocious eyes. For all that, when he finally met the culprit behind Tianlanjin's bout of philosophical soul-searching, which had tormented Zhuzhi-lang for far too many days, he realized that the culprit in question was not quite like what he'd envisioned. Tianlanjin's loved wandering the human realm, and wandering the human realm required spending money, yet he never remembered to bring any, so Zhuzhi-lang could only remember for him. However, Tianlanjin had no concept of money's value, and therefore he knew no restraint. Whenever he felt gallant, he slapped down thousands at once, and it was impossible for Zhuzhi-lang to stop him. With those spending habits, things would have been difficult even if they'd had a mountain of gold or a sea of silver. Thus, in the end, they constantly ended up broke. Why am I loving this dynamic so much? Just as these two tourists were standing penniless in the streets, a tall woman dressed in black strolled by, sword on her back. "Halt," said Tianlanjin. As their shoulders brushed, that woman slightly raised her eyebrows, a mocking smile curling a corner of her lips. She did indeed halt. Okay, before we focus on that, just look at this beautifulness. This is truly stunning. I'm gonna miss the art. Obviously, I'm also gonna miss the story, but sorry, I don't know where that one came from. Um, if one sights an injustice while on the road, said Tianlanjin, should they not draw their swords to give aid? If it's a matter of drawing her sword, this humble one will consider it, said the woman. Conversely, if it's a matter of opening her purse, this humble one refuses. For you have yet to return the 3 silvers I lent you last time. Oh my word. Is that so? Said Tianlanjin. It's only 3 silvers. All right, if you lend me 3 more, you can purchase me for 3 days. The woman flatly refused. Your distinguished self doesn't look strong enough to carry any burdens. Rather, he looks like someone who has never toiled, who can't distinguish wheat from rice. What's the point of buying you? Wow, she just burned him. They were so cute. They are indeed. Zhuzhi-lang watched this for a long time, then said frankly, "My lord, I fear that this one is disparaging you for being too expensive." Tianlanjun was indeed being disparaged. This wasn't new. Sometimes the servants and guards who served him secretly disparaged him too, especially when he was performing his passionate and dramatic recitations. Recitations? Ah. But being told he was worth less than a mere 3 silvers? That was a bit much. Let's put all that aside for now, said Tianlanjun. Surely my face can't be worth less than 3 silvers. The woman choked a little, then studied his face for a while and smiled. True, it's worth that much. Then she tossed him a heavy ingot of gold. Okay, I kind of like this reverse, like, sugar. Is sugar mommy a thing? But it's kind of giving, like, sugar mommy vibes. I kind of love that. From then on, it was as if a dam had broken, and Tiananjun's expenditures in the human realm burst out like a flood. He became even more unrestrained, even more unfettered, to the point that it was terrifying to watch. He'd found a rich patron, a mountain of gold. Whenever Zhuzhi-lang pulled out an empty purse with a slightly embarrassed expression, Tianlanjun would happily and thoughtlessly go to the mountain and knock on her gates. Zhuzhi-lang couldn't shake the feeling that something about this was wrong, that something was backward. Oh, not me showing my uncultured side. Sorry about that. Why was Sun Shuyan acting like one of those wealthy young masters and players with the distinguished statuses and heaps of money? Why was Tianlanjun acting like one of those pampered young ladies who had run away from home and was ignorant of the world? Because that's exactly what it is, and I kind of love it. Um, And why was Zhuzhi-lang acting like the prudent servant girl accompanying that lady, running errands and doing odd jobs? Zhuzhi-lang had attempted to alert his lord to this reversal of roles, to tell him that he needed to retrieve his dignity as the highest ruler of the demon realm. But Tianlanjun seemed to find pleasure in this sugar daddy, sugar baby relationship. Not the book itself being like, yes, this is exactly what it is. Oh my word. Passion that he had in the past directed to the entire human race was now poured entirely upon a single person. Sushian was truly a cold and ruthless, yet really extraordinary person. When they met up, she took them to see various rare and wonderful things, and to all manner of interesting and intriguing places. Forbidden courtesies Zhuzhi-lang couldn't find, no matter how he tried, a wondrous spirit mushroom within a certain hidden cave, a dew lake with waters that shone like crystals, an obscure and marvelously skilled pippa-playing prostitute. When they weren't together, they'd see no trace of her for 10 or 15 days, and would be unable to find her no matter how they tried. She never batted an eyelid, nor expressed any hint of infatuation, nor spoke of pining. She had her own plots and calculations, and she looked coldly on from the sidelines. Because half his blood came from the serpent race, Zhuzhi-lang possessed a kind of natural animal instinct. He faintly sensed that this person who kept approaching them was was an exceedingly dangerous entity. She wasn't like demon women, with their enchanting by-the-book charm. Instead, she was solemn and driven, though she gave off the impression of being refined and courteous. Yet it was indeed only the impression of being refined and courteous. Zhuzhi-lang dared not assume he would in fact get off as easily. Hmm? Get off easy at her hands if it ever came to a true brutal fight. Beneath the refined surface lay arrogance and indifference, along with an ambition that further concealed her scheming. As Huang Palace's second-in-command, Zhuzhi-lang enjoyed a high and lofty status and commanded thousands at every turn. On top of that, the cultivation world that Huanhua Palace led alongside the other major sects had been the demon race's nemesis since ancient times. Zhuzhi-lang was indeed someone incredibly dangerous as far as they were concerned. Zhuzhi-lang reported all this information he'd found in full detail, yet Tenlanjun wasn't remotely concerned. Once he became infatuated with something, he disregarded even life and death as he threw all his eggs into one basket. It wasn't like he didn't know the truth, he just nonetheless never showed any doubts. Um, Demon Overlord, who is a romantic one wandering in the human realm, fascinated with humans and their novels, becoming a sugar baby to a human woman who shows him various cool spots and such is such a nice idea, right? Like it just it's so familiar and yet so different at the same time. And I feel like the moment it hits that sweet spot, it's a good idea to write. Um, Okay. The price of never doubting her was to be sealed beneath the sunless, skyless darkness of Bai Luo Mountain for more than 10 years, with no chance of return. I want to kill humans. During those more than 10 years, that was the line Tenlanjin repeated most often. In the past, he had loved humans more than anything, so he'd never done such things. Without his vast demonic energy to sustain Zhuzhi-lang's man-shaped form, Zhuzhi-lang once again reverted to his half-snake appearance. Every time Tianmanjin saw him arduously slithering back and forth, he would lash out with a "get lost," or he'd say, "Your slithering is far too ugly." Zhuzhi-lang would then silently squirm away and search the outside for a place untouched by the sun and moon. There he would continue to practice his slithering, now rusted from years of disuse. Can we just all agree to kind of like protect Zhuzhi-lang? I know that he has made a lot of bad choices, but he is also weirdly endearing. Lord's temper became unimaginably terrible, but Zhuzhi-lang couldn't summon even the slightest bit of strength to feel hurt or angry. Tianlanjin's get lost was telling him to get lost to the demon realm, or to get lost to the southern border, or to get lost to his old home, or to get lost to anywhere, so long as he didn't remain in front of Tianlanjin. Tianlanjin couldn't stand for others to see him so wretched and downtrodden, in a state where he could beg for neither life nor death. From the moment of his birth, he'd been the demon race's most respected crown prince. He'd never tasted suffering, had always been composed and elegant, and had rejected all crude and vulgar things that would ruin his reputation. He'd even had some slight mouse phobia. He'd hated anything ugly, but now, as he was uglier than anyone. Covered in blood, he'd been sealed beneath 72 metal chains and 49 potent paper talismans, forced to watch every day as his body slowly rotted and began to stink, all while his mind remained perfectly clear, unable to lose consciousness even if he wished to. That is freaking awful. I don't think I ever truly realized how, like, the extent of what they did to him. That gang from the cultivation world had lacked the ability to kill him outright, so they thought up every possible method to torment him instead. Even Zhuzhi-lang's ugly half-snake form looked slightly better than Tianlanjin did in the state. Having reverted to his old form, Zhuzhi-lang was unable to speak, So Tianlanjun began talking to himself. For almost half the hours in every day, he would recite the songs and dialogues from those plays. Sometimes, as Tianlanjun was singing, he would abruptly cease, as if his throat had been slit. Zhuzhi-lang would then know that it must have been a play Zhuzhi-lang had taken them to watch. Oh, damn. But after pausing for a time, Tianlanjun would start again, just as abruptly, continuing in a louder voice. Between his hoarse throat and the deserted valley, the lingering melodies drifted, long and drawn out and heart-rending. Zhuzhi-lang was unable to speak. You couldn't tell him to stop singing. He couldn't raise his arms, couldn't cover his ears, couldn't prevent himself from hearing the notes. More and more he understood what it meant to be utterly powerless. When something makes you sad, when something brings you pain, why continue to force yourself to do it? The only thing he could do was persistently, day after day, use leaves to carry the dew lake's water and bring it drop by drop to clean Tianlanjun's eternally unhealing wounds. Damn. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop here for today because we made a decent amount of progress, I think, and it is exactly on the hour. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. We are at the top of page 134. We still have a decent way to go because there are, let me check, 373 pages. So we're not halfway yet, but I'm hoping that we'll get halfway before I go on holiday. Um, I'll have to check if that's even plausible. But also, I'm gonna, so we'll have Tuesday and Thursday next week still, I think. Let me just quickly think this through. Okay, so there would be a bit of an issue if I do Tuesday and Thursday next week. I won't be able to record these, like, me reading any more of it. So I'll think on how to approach that because I still need to do the poll on whether you guys want me to wait until we're live again or pre-record some of these and put them up on our, like, when we would regularly have our lives. So I'll put that poll up and then decide where to go from it because I think it might be best if I maybe do Monday and Tuesday next week because I will need time to actually be able to form those and we're leaving on Friday. But anyway, okay, sorry for all the rambling. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you have a good weekend and otherwise I'll see you in the next one. 再见。